Because addiction is so stigmatized, because society hates addicts, and Jeff tells me addicts loathe themselves, you just stay separate in 2 different worlds, 4 different worlds, 8 different worlds, but you don't talk. And in that not talking, addiction lives. Addiction lives. Every mother, I think, wants to say, my kid's great, you know, everything's great. You know, people say to you, how's Jeff? You know, you want to say, he's wonderful, he's going to a great college, everything's perfect, he has a wife and a family, and blah, 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 blah. However you define success. And so the shame of it is the hardest. You don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to fix it. If you knew how to fix it, it would have to be easier, but I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't have anybody to talk with about it. I didn't want to talk to anybody about it. And I really felt that it was my failure, you know? I figured I must have done something really wrong, because he was such a good kid at the beginning.
Childhood was great. I loved skateboarding. I loved the way my body felt when I was skateboarding and landing tricks and getting better, you know, as a rider. So it was in middle school that I started smoking pot. A guy that was giving me bass guitar lessons at the local guitar shop. And he sold me pot. It was the first place that I got it. He sold me some pot. And I smoked it with the same kid whose house it was, where everyone was smoking. But as we got into our teenage years, excitement became synonymous with getting wasted. Partying became synonymous with getting wasted. It was a matter of, you know, what drugs did we have and how high could we get? It went from pot to acid for the most part. And acid, like our weekends were like one big acid trip.
When I started to have problems with Jeffrey at school, my ego got in the way. I didn't want anybody to know. I started dragging him to psychologists. Jeff went to one psychologist after another, and it didn't help anything.
Why did you chase psychology?
Because I wanted somebody to fix it. I wanted somebody to fix my problem.
I think that my parents were probably in denial around the whole thing happening, and even if they did have to choke down the idea of me using drugs, you know, I don't think that they wanted to turn it inward and say this was a family problem or this is something that, you know, can be dealt with at home. It was a matter of just stopping. It's like, if you're doing drugs, stop it. This is wrong. It's illegal. Stop. But there wasn't much discussion around the topic. And I think as a result, it just kind of forced me to keep that stuff quiet and to keep it in a very personal space instead of bring that into the open.
When I had breast cancer, I opened up the door and there were 20 women out there helping me. Everybody wanted to help me. But when my son was an addict, I opened the door and there wasn't anybody. So you're alone and you isolate yourself. What are you supposed to do?
Anything that shuts down dialogue, I think, is really dangerous. And that's what the stigma does. The stigma keeps people isolated in a big way.
Oftentimes people would say he needs to go to treatment, okay? Treatment is 30 days and $20,000 to $30,000 for 30 days. And insurance doesn't help. So Jeff went to maybe 10, 12 treatment centers. I mean, do the math. Now, Jeff was shooting heroin into him. I mean, his veins in his arms, his legs, his feet. I mean, at the end, he was shooting into his neck and into his groin. I mean, he just destroyed his body. And so somebody called me from Tough Love and said, I was just went nuts. And he said, you need to have a funeral for your son. I said, what? He says, you have to, in your mind, bury Jeff. And when he calls, you have to say, Jeff's not here. Jeff died. I didn't do that. Other advice, throw him out of the house. Throw him out of the house. You know, cross him out. And I used to tell him, forget the address. I mean, I jumped all over the place. As a mother, you're nuts. You just want your kid to be well. And you know that your kid's alive. You know that your kid's underneath the drugs. You just don't know how to get him there anymore. You don't know what to do.
My life was dominated by heroin. Heroin leaves this very sweet and warm wash over you. I've always had an overactive mind. My mind's always been a whirlwind. And heroin stops that. Heroin silences everything. And for someone who thinks too damn much to begin with, that's a really precious effect. And heroin got me there.
When I had breast cancer, Jeff came home and he said, you know, what can I do? And I said, you know, for a woman to not have her hair washed is really terrible. And I said, you can wash my hair. And he said, well, like, how do I do it? He's like, how do I do that, you know? So I got all my products. You know, women have a lot of products. And so all the products, I brought them to the kitchen sink. And I was in the sink and he washed my hair. And well, then we went into the bathroom and he put a chair in front of the mirror and he dries my hair and he has the brush. And he's curling the brush and drying my hair, and like he's not too steady. And I'm in this watching me and him. I'm watching myself and watching him, and Mom, how am I doing? How am I doing? Jeff, you're doing better than my hairdresser. And he turns and he says, Mom, he says, you look so pretty. I looked like hell. But his humanity was still there. He was still my kid. He was still my firstborn son, taking care of his mother. So, a heroin addict that people hate.
The first year or two, heroin wasn't as destructive. And I remember, you know, getting sick. I remember the first time I tried to detox. I remember the first time I really felt my body like go into hard withdrawals. And it was terrible. But I justified it all until my life was just torn down to the ground as a result of it.
Somebody must have told me about a woman in our county who helped people with get into Al-Anon. And so I called her. And I remember she answered the phone. And I said, Francine, this is Libby. You don't know me, but, and just cry, just sob. She didn't know who I was. All I did was sob. And she met me at 7 o'clock that night in front of the 7-Eleven and took me to an Al-Anon meeting. That was my saving grace, Al-Anon. But it took me forever to go, because we lived in this very small county and I was ashamed. I was ashamed to go for help. I was ashamed to go to Al-Anon because I thought, what if I see a parent here? I went to 4 Al-Anon groups before I finally found one I liked. And because the 4th one that I went to had 3 mothers there whose kids were addicted. Now, the sad commentary on that is this was 10 years ago. And I went to 4 groups. The 4th group had 3 parents, right? I still go to Al-Anon meetings. Now the rooms are filled with parents.
Car crashes, legal stuff, financial stuff. You know, a lot of my relationships were ruined at that point in time. My health was bad. And I was literally living from one high to the next. It was at that time that my mom was still pretty consistent in my life. I mean, the money stopped. I mean, she stopped funding my mistakes. She stopped, you know, paying rent. Just all the support that I could count on in my teens and 20s, that ended. But her emotional presence in my life didn't. And all of a sudden there was this air of calmness that came over her, this suspicious air of calmness that came over her. That she'd take the phone calls when I literally had nowhere else to turn. You know, I knew that Mom was there.
You still feel that shame, you still feel that fear. You're really afraid for your child and you're afraid he's gonna die. And at the end, I had to surrender to that. I had to surrender. I had to say, I love you, but I'm going to surrender. I can't do anything. I can't fix you. And the only person who can fix you is you. And fight. Fight.
The stigma around it probably kept me out there a little longer. Just because there's a lot of shame and guilt with addiction anyways. But when you start looking at, you know, kind of what are my friends going to think when I make this public? What are my parents going to say when I tell them that I'm, shooting dope, into my neck 5 times a day? I mean, there's real ugliness attached to that. And I'm not going to say that like the stigma is entirely unfounded. I get it. There's a lot of ugly stuff that happens, as a result of maintaining an addiction. But in spite of that bad behavior, it is imperative that at some point in time we can really come clean with this and say, hey, this is the life that I'm living. These are the decisions that I've made. This is the cycle that I feel absolutely handcuffed to, and it hurts and it sucks. And I need someone else to help me carry the weight of this thing.
So the whole idea of stay close is really that. I'm close to you. And it doesn't mean physical. It doesn't mean I have to sit next door to you. I was close and I was in Italy. But emotionally, he knew that he was still loved. At the very end, it's really hard for an addict who's totally out of his head to figure out, how do I even get help? But Jeff chose to live. Know that there is hope. And that hope, if there's hope, there's life.
Absolutely.